Welcome to Tell Me How Good It Got. Stories of women who defied the rules and ditched the script for what life's supposed to look and came out healthier, happier, hotter, and more themselves. I'm your host, Majo Torelli, and today I'm thrilled to introduce Katie Bryan. Katie is a mindset coach, community facilitator, and host of the Single Greatest Choice podcast. She lives in Austin, Texas, with her adorable 4.5-year-old son, Miles, and poorly behaved Cocker Spaniel mix, Oliver. Motherhood was always part of Katie's plan, but doing it alone wasn't. When she found herself single in her late 30s, solo motherhood felt like a last resort. But surprisingly, it became the single greatest choice of her life. That unexpected decision brought more fulfillment than she ever imagined, both in the experience of motherhood and in the community she's fostered. With her own pivot into solo parenting, Katie was determined to create a vibrant community of bold, brave women navigating the decision to parent on their own. Now, she's dedicated to helping these women find clarity, confidence, and connection on their solo motherhood journeys. Because while we may be single, we don't have to walk this road alone. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I have loved learning about your mission and this project of yours. And I have to say, I've listened to a few episodes, and even just now as you're doing your intro, thank you for putting the hotter in there. Every time I hear that, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that feels good.
Yeah, totally. Look at you, girl. You're glowing. And yeah, I mean, when I heard your story on Quiet the Clock, I was so mesmerized. I'm like, wow, I love this. I love that you took something that so many women struggle with and did it such an empowering thing, community out of it. And I would love to hear from you. What was your journey and how did
Yeah,
you get
I
to where you
I
are
love to
now?
share my story, and I want to just start by saying all of that is true, and it is definitely not what it felt like as I was moving through it. So in hindsight, it's been empowering and, this amazing journey, but much of the lived experience of it, I didn't know that I was on this life-changing journey. I thought I was settling, not settling, but, it felt like life was happening to me. And so I just wanna say that because I think if someone is in a place of listening to empowering stories of other women and thinking that's not for them, like, it may just be that they can't see it yet, like, they may already be in the transition of their own kind of how good it's gonna get, and they just may not know it yet, because I think had you interviewed me at lots of different points of the story, I would have not felt empowered. Anyway, just kinda wanted to start there.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
a really great nuance. And I think, I mean, it's very real because, yeah, it looks very nice and empowering when time has passed by and you're like past the integration stage and the growth stage. But I'm sure it didn't feel that way at many stages.
Right, right, right. Yeah. So where would you like me to start? What do you wanna know about the journey?
In the very, very beginning.
Well, that could be a lot of different places. I will say I grew up mostly in Texas, and we're in the South, and people still tend to get married pretty young here. And it's not a matter of if you're going to get married for the most part, it's kind of when and how many kids are you going to have. And just that was sort of the cultural expectation that I grew up in. And I never doubted that that would be my own journey. And I think that career and any other aspirations were really secondary to knowing that I wanted to be a wife and a mom. And I did get married early. I was 23 and was married for 5 years. And ultimately, we were just too young to really know ourselves and to know what we were looking for. And, I wish him well, but I am very glad I'm not married to him. But there was no like drama really. It was just sort of like we didn't know what we didn't know. And I think part of accepting because the divorce was not my idea nor my preference. I really thought that we could work things through. And I think part of what helped me ease the pain of divorce was thinking, well, you live and learn, and now like marriage 2.0 will be better, right? Like I'll have like all of the great things that were missing from the first marriage, and none of the bad things will come with me. And so I felt once I kind of grieved that loss, I was excited and hopeful. And that really carried through most of my 30s. I was 28 when I got divorced. And so for 5 or 6 years, I think I was so increasingly anxious about finding the right person, but never doubting that it was going to happen. It was just sort of like, okay, when is this going to happen? I did have another pretty serious relationship where we did get engaged, and it was just very clear to me it was not the right fit. And I could tell that part of saying yes when my intuition was screaming no was that I was ready for kids. So when that relationship ended, I didn't go straight to, "Now I'm ready to consider solo motherhood." I think at the time I was maybe 35, so I was at that age where people start to talk about fertility dropping and, things like that, but I was still hopeful, I was still dating, and I think it took until about 2018, I think I was about 37 at the time when I really started thinking, "Okay, I need to take dating very seriously, make it my top priority, and just really invest in that process this year, regardless of I'm an introvert. I'm like, regardless of how much I don't wanna leave the house, like, I have to go on lots of dates because it really felt like that was the order of things, right? If I wanna be a mom, I'm worried about my fertility, I've gotta hurry and meet a partner. And so I was very intentional in 2018 about dating. I went on many, many, many first dates. I did end up meeting someone remarkable who is still one of my closest friends, and at the same time as I got into that new relationship, really hoping that it was the one, I did a fertility test, just an at home. They have tests. They're Everlywell, I think was the company I used. There's Modern Fertility. There are different places where it's like a finger prick. You send off a blood sample and you get some feedback
Mm.
about your fertility. And within the first week or two of this new relationship, I found that I had diminished ovarian reserve. And that just, I think emotionally, I just immediately was not in a place to be, like, low key getting to know someone because I was so anxious. And this lovely man was kind of along for the ride for really over a year, and I mean, still, he still is a big part of my life, but I couldn't date in that pressure cooker of worrying about my fertility. And so it started with even while I was in the relationship deciding to freeze eggs, which was something that before that point, I had told myself was financially out of reach, but it turned out with enough pressure, I found the money, once I had this feedback that I had diminished ovarian reserve, but that did not go super well. I didn't get a ton of eggs from that first retrieval, and so ultimately the relationship ended so that I could pursue solo motherhood, but it was not what I wanted to be doing. It felt like my only choice at the time.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack, and that's really brave. And when
Yeah.
you say at the time, what was the moment? I mean, of course, this was gradual, but was there a moment where you said, "Yeah, this is definitely it. This is I'm doing this by myself"?
I think before I got into that last relationship, I was very clear that at the end of 2018, I would either be in a relationship that felt like it was heading in the direction of marriage and family, or I would be pursuing solo motherhood. I had kind of set that at the beginning of the year. So I knew it was a possibility. I just was really hoping it wouldn't be something I would have to to do. And when I met this man, it was June. We were halfway through the year, and we dated kind of up until the end of 2018. We actually started the breakup conversation, which lasted several weeks, on New Year's Day of 2019. And so I kind of entered into 2019 with a handful of frozen eggs, some not great news about my fertility, this relationship with this person that we deeply cared about each other, but it was just too much pressure to try to kind of get to know one another. And I had also been in relationships in the past where I knew even a year of being with someone wasn't enough to truly know
Yeah.
if I wanted to spend a lifetime with them. And both of us were very clear on not wanting to, have kids in a scenario where we weren't sure. Yeah, so that was kinda where I was at that point in 2019, and I did start trying to conceive very quickly after the relationship ended. So it ended in January, and by March, I was doing IUIs with, donor sperm. So an IUI is kind of a lot of times people just talk about, like, the turkey baster where they just monitor when you're gonna ovulate, and then they put the sperm in the right place at the right time and hope for the best. And it's not a super, effective way to get pregnant. It's actually, I mean, it has about the same rate of success as intercourse, which is surprisingly low. It seems
Hmm.
like it would be higher, but it's about a 10% chance per cycle if you don't have other underlying fertility issues that it would work. So I knew that it was more likely to not work than to work. So I was kind of taking that gamble each month of trying to get pregnant and then like kind of secretly hoping it wouldn't work because I truly wasn't ready to be a solo parent, and it did still feel very sad and like I had a lot of grief around it, but
Yeah.
I also felt so anxious about my fertility that I wasn't comfortable not trying either. So it was a really hard season because I didn't know what I wanted, and I really wasn't in touch with my intuition because I felt very, very much in a scarcity place in terms of my options.
Yeah, yeah, that I mean, I resonate with a lot of what you're saying. First of all, because I come from a very conservative background as well, and everything is ticking clocks for women, and you do follow a certain path. And then on top of that, I was diagnosed with PCOS at an early age, so I know the stress around fertility worries. And on top of that, the societal conditioning, it's a lot. And like you say, especially at a time where probably you don't have the resources back then that you have now, right? So
Mhm.
what were those resources, if any? How did you navigate that period of your life?
In terms of just, like, information
In
and, like,
terms, yeah,
content? Yeah.
friendships, relationships,
Yeah,
any
so
type
the
of
other
support.
thing yeah, the other thing about this time period is that this was 2019. I tried to get pregnant in March, April, May, and June of 2019, and then I did get pregnant in June of 2019, which led to a miscarriage, and at the time, it was very complex emotionally because I did feel some sadness when I found out that I was pregnant, and that was really a surprise to me because all along I had been telling myself that the desire for motherhood would just sort of override all of this grief that I was experiencing once it happened. And that was not what I experienced, but then I also was sad when the pregnancy wasn't viable, but also relieved, like, it was just very messy, but with a miscarriage, something I didn't know was that the my body continued to think that I was pregnant much longer than I was, and so hormonally, it took several months for all of the hormones to kind of go back to a level where I could try again, and I also had to have a surgical procedure called a DNC, and it was just, like, more recovery than I previously knew about, and so by the time I kind of got back to trying to conceive, now we're looking at early 2020. So, in terms of what support looked like, it was very much impacted by the global pandemic that
Mm.
picture right around that time. So, I was mostly online. I was in Facebook groups. I was reading, checked out books from the library and I was reading anything I could find about the topic. But there honestly wasn't a whole lot that I was finding that felt encouraging. The Facebook groups are very large, but they're like many large Facebook groups, kind of like drive by information. And what I mean by that is like someone posts 50 people respond and then you move to the next post and someone
Mm.
posts and 50, but there's no relationship building really. It was just sort of like if I want an
Yeah.
answer to a question about like this is the medical protocol that my doctor gave, is this what your doctor gave you? Those types of things, like the Facebook groups were great for that, but I found that in terms of support, rather than support, what I found in the Facebook groups was a lot of pressure. There were a lot of women who, understandably, because they had experienced some fertility struggles once they decided to pursue solo motherhood, because many women wait, of course, till it feels like the last minute. There was a lot of really intense messaging around don't wait, don't wait, don't wait. Like, I wish I would have started earlier. You should do it as soon as you like have the idea to pursue solo motherhood. Very much pressure to move forward. And I get where that is coming from women who struggle, but it doesn't hold space for the grief process that I think many of us need to go through to be ready. And I was someone who I thought, like, even at the time, I could feel that I was moving too fast emotionally, but maybe too so biologically because I was
Yeah.
struggling, but then I also like really emotionally wasn't ready. So I decided to create my podcast and everything that followed because I wanted to talk about the nuances of that, the pacing, like the emotional pacing not being the same as the biological pacing and just how complex it is to make this decision.
That sounds like a gift from heaven for someone undergoing that process. And because it does sound like very paradoxical, all of this, oh, I want to move forward. And at the same time, all of these things are very heavy and intense. And how would you describe who you were back then, like the Katie in her early stages of that process versus who you are now? How long has it been, by the way?
My son is 4 and a half. So I started, I mean, all of this started kind of 2018 into 2019. So we're in 2026 now. So it's been a
Yeah.
while. I mean, it's been definitely a chunk of life. I do feel like a different person than I was back then. I also like transitioned into my 40s since then. And I think that that has been a really beautiful like, the words that come to mind is, like, a coming of age, like, maybe I'm a late bloomer, but, I've truly loved being in my 40s, I've loved being a mom, so it does feel like I'm pretty far out from this period of my life, but because I've talked about it so much, I have pretty vivid memories of what it felt like to be there. And I think you asked, what was I like, or what was the Katie, of that time period. I was very like earnestly pursuing personal development. I really wanted to feel better. And
Mm.
at the time, now I think as a society, and I mean, not a whole society, but those of us who are really interested in personal development, we are far more tapped into more of the somatic experience and more of like nervous system regulation and things like that. But back in this stage, it was really still very focused on thought work. And so what I was finding in the coaching space and in like, the books that were being published and things like that was just like think different thoughts so you can feel better, which I mean, there's a lot of truth to that, and it was extremely helpful, but I found some of the what I was finding in the coaching space to be a little bit, like, militant, al almost in the same way as some of those Facebook groups who are like, "Just, like, don't
Yeah.
wait." I'm like, "But it's gotta be more complex than that." And, like, "Just think better thoughts." I'm like, "Okay, but, like, I don't my body is freaking out," you know?
Yeah.
So, I think, again, I went into the coaching space, like to become trained as a coach and to work in the coaching space because I felt that gap of like before we can choose a different thought, oftentimes there's a deep need for acknowledgement and self-compassion and just holding space for the original thoughts that are causing so much pain and the reason why they're there in the first place. And I don't think
Exactly.
that it necessarily serves us to just be like, those were bad thoughts. Let me find some good thoughts or some new thoughts. I think that those original thoughts deserve care. Like they're there to protect us. They come from a part of us who is believes that that framework is necessary for survival. And so the
Yeah.
coaching that I've built has really brought together the world of thought work, which is still very important, integrated with deep self-compassion and a more like neck down approach to when we lie to ourselves, our body knows, right? And so
Yeah.
we can't just think better thoughts. So yeah, so I think that I was pursuing all of that on a personal level, never meaning to turn it into a business or anything like that. I just wanted to feel better. And as I grew personally and it could see the gap in the market and was willing to do terrifying things, um, like, leave my job or I went down to part-time first, but, those types of things, like, it just kind of all evolved. I think every time the universe would kind of, like, open up the portal a little wider, and I'd be like, "Okay, I think I'll, like, go step in and just see what happens," and, it's just been the adventure of a lifetime to be able to play, and that's really what it feels like to just play in this space of personal development at the intersection of fertility and like identity and really taking ownership of our stories in our life.
I love that choice of words, play and identity and expansion, because I so feel it. I'm in the early stages of my own journey playing with the universe. So I totally relate to that and I love it. And I also really like, I think it's beautiful what you're saying about the body and how you cannot override. I mean, you can override it, but essentially it will backfire at some
Yeah.
point. And I'm really curious because I also know that you have clients and women come to you at different stages, right? And with different needs and with different things that are unfolding in your lives. And I think it's so important to hold space for whatever it is, to make that decision from abundance and a place of empowerment. And I wonder if sometimes you have even clients, women coming to you that perhaps they decide not to. And like you hold space just for any type of decision to unfold. Because what I hear from your experience with the Facebook groups and just everything in the traditional coaching space is like very linear, right? And very like push, push, push.
Yes.
And sometimes that's just not what you need. And I suppose you can, in your approach, you have space for whatever is best for that person to unfold. And maybe that is single motherhood. Maybe that's not single motherhood, or maybe later on, how does that look like?
Yes. Yes, I think the secret about my coaching that I'm not sure my clients know when they come in is that it really we are talking about solo motherhood and that being a choice that they're considering or pursuing. but it really could be about anything. What I'm
Mm,
helping my clients do is the way I describe it to them is like it's taking your purse and like dumping everything out on the table and kind of like sorting through if those are all of your thoughts, like deciding what you're going to put back in and sort of defining the narrative for yourself and really kind of developing a sense of autonomy and choice for any decision that you're making. And it may be that I am working with a woman who is trying to decide if she's going to become a solo parent. But sometimes it's like, do I need to move before I have a baby? Do I involve my friends and family in choosing my donor, or is it something that I do privately? How do I like, let's rehearse the conversation I'm going to have with my boss who's going to be shocked because they've never even me to go on a date and now all of a sudden I'm pregnant. So it's all kinds of different things. The coaching strategies are universal. They're not super specific to the topic of, as you can imagine, there's no coach training for the single
yeah.
mother by so I've kind of developed it as I go. But yeah, it really does hold space for whatever. It's I come from a place of believing that the answers are already within and that sometimes it's helpful just to hear yourself say it out
Yeah.
loud and have someone else say to you, that makes so much sense. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
not all of my clients are even would necessarily identify as someone on a personal development journey. Not always women who are already reading those types of books or listening to those podcasts. Sometimes they are, but not always. And so there is also sort of a spectrum in terms of like how where the entry point is depending on kind of their background. And that is something that I ask on my intake form is like what other voices are you listening to? Like what podcasts, what
Yeah.
books you've been reading, just trying to kinda get a sense of their starting point in terms of mindset.
Yeah. I love that. I love that because the end point, whatever their journey looks like, is agency, right? And
Mhm.
that's incredible, Katie. And is there something that you feel you had to really let die in you or about how just the Katie that you were before, that identity? Because I love that you mentioned you're loving your 40s
Yeah.
and you're probably a brand new Katie, right?
Yeah.
What did you have to let die?
Yeah, I mean, I would say two big things come to mind. One is the belief that someone else was gonna come and save me. It still comes up from time to time, not necessarily in a romantic sense, but just when I feel overwhelmed. Honestly, lately it's come up in hiring some coaches and then being like, "Wait, I already know. Like, I just need to trust myself." Like, I've spent several $1,000s, trying to outsource my intuition. So, I think that, just really releasing the belief that there is someone who's gonna come in on a white horse and save me, whether that was the man that I thought was gonna be the father of my child or the coach that is gonna tell me exactly what to do in my business next. It just doesn't exist. Like, if anyone's gonna it's gonna be me.
Yeah.
So that's the
Uh,
first thing, and then I would say the second thing is I just really had to give up any kind of thoughts about what other people think about me. And that is what it has required to create like a public platform, but also just to live my life and to know there are people who like there was a video, a kind of an interview like this that went out on YouTube and there are comments that people would say, "Oh, that's so sad for that child. Oh, I feel so sorry for that child that doesn't have a dad," and things like there are going to be people who don't understand and don't agree with the decision to parent solo, and I don't have to make that mean anything about me. Like they're allowed to be I think they're wrong about me and they're allowed to be wrong about me.
yeah.
Uh, so I think that just releasing that desire to be understood and approved of is another big piece.
Yeah, so much. And it is very much a part of this expansion that we were talking about because, yep, I've spent thousands of dollars myself also outsourcing my intuition. So can relate. And the Prince Charming, the White Horse, everything. I used to think love and relationships were my school. I was doing like the school of love, and that was teaching me a lot of things I needed about worth. And now through this business and being out and if with my own platform, it's definitely doing that. And yeah, nobody will come to save you.
Mhm.
And that is so true. Thank you for sharing that, Katie. And I wonder, when did things start to get good for you?
So in January, well, okay, I'll back up just a bit. So I did the 4 IUIs in 2019. So I made 4 attempts to get pregnant, got pregnant on the fourth one, had a miscarriage, was relieved for the most part, but also sad and scared because what does this mean for my fertility? Does this mean that I'm gonna struggle or maybe even not be able to conceive? And so it was a really hard blow to feel like I don't want to be doing this anyway, and now maybe I can't. Like that's not fair, you know. But at the end of that year, I did do 2 more rounds of IUI with a different donor, and those also did not work. And at that point, I had changed clinics and had a new doctor who was just wonderful and like so much more supportive of my overall vision. Shocker, it was a woman. My first my first doctor was a man. And she's amazing. If anyone's listening and wanting some like fertility support, her name's Dr. Natalie Crawford, and she has a big YouTube and podcast platform, and she's just incredible. She's got a book coming out as well. So switching to her and just having her support was huge in my journey. And she asked me for the first time, what do you really want? Like if you could have anything, like what do you really want? And no one had asked me that yet on this journey. It was I felt like we were at a place where it didn't matter what I wanted. I just had to keep trying to have a baby right now because maybe that was like maybe even that wasn't going to happen. And like that was the best I could hope for was just to get pregnant whether I was ready or not. And so this doctor really helped me see that there were things that I could do outside of currently trying to conceive that would help kind of lay the groundwork. And so we talked about freezing more eggs, creating embryos that could be frozen, and preparing not just for one child on my own at a time that felt right for me, but even preparing for more than one child on my own. And so instead of trying each month to get pregnant, I started banking eggs and embryos for a future version of me who would feel ready. And that just really shifted things because I felt like I had autonomy. I felt like I had
Yeah.
choices to make. I felt empowered instead of in this like victim, like it's now or never. And maybe it's never even if you want it now. And it like, I don't even want it now. Like just all of that sort of woe is me just really went away when I started to feel like maybe I had more options than I had been led to believe. And so I was very, very lucky that though I had a low number of eggs, my eggs were higher quality and they fertilized and the genetic testing came back higher than average for my age. And so I found myself with embryos, which you can't test the quality of an egg, but you can test embryos. And so embryos, of course, are like you have the egg and the sperm has come together. So it's like the full DNA is present. And so I knew I had enough embryos to create the family that I would want on my own. And I also had eggs that hadn't been fertilized that now I knew were high quality because I had fertilized some, I had more information about the likelihood that the ones that hadn't been fertilized would lead to a child at some point if I wanted to. So I found myself in a place where I could just go back to dating if I wanted to because I could wait a year. I was 37, 38 at the time. You know, I could wait one more year. It wasn't going to cost me anything fertility wise to wait to become a solo mom. But also, if I met someone, I had eggs frozen that potentially I could, have a child with that person. So I was really feeling like the world was my oyster. I went on this incredible hiking trip on my own in Big Bend, kind of West Texas in January of 2020. That was the place where I really felt a spiritual connection with my son. I felt his name. I felt his presence and I felt him say, I'm ready, but I'll wait as long as you need to. And it was
Oh,
very profound. Like it was very real to me.
oh, that gave me chills.
Yes, me too. Still. And I thanked him and I told him I'm not ready. And I felt at peace with that. And I felt his peace with that. And I was gonna come back and date and wait and see. And then we got hit by a global pandemic. And one thing that I think can really help with discernment is having choice taken away from you. The minute the fertility clinic sent the email that said, we are closed, we are not doing embryo transfers, our doors I was like, fuck no. Like, I was going to be right this minute. My son just told me he's ready. I was so riled up by it. But I also, at the same time, felt deep relief that now even just like the world was telling me take a break, right?
Yeah.
For January, February, March, April, May, like those through June, like those 6 months were just like a breath of fresh air because I had eggs, I had embryos, I had a plan. I felt connected. I knew that my son was coming. Like I knew he was so real to me and I didn't feel rushed. And so as soon as clinics opened back up, I think it was maybe May of 2020, I started thinking, okay, I'm just going to take it slow, but I'm really open to doing this whenever it feels right. And by July of 2020, I could not wait to try to get pregnant. And I went in, I got so dressed up. I had on bright red lipstick. I was wearing heels. I know everybody in the clinic because you put on a hospital gown once you go in. Like, I know everyone's like, have something after this. I'm like, nope, this is the big thing.
This is the thing. This is it.
Yes. And I remember the doctor saying after they did the embryo transfer, she said, "Now, this is the part where we just really like release control because, it has about a 65% chance of working, so more likely that it would work than not, but, about 45% of the time these transfers just don't stick and we don't know why and there's nothing you're going to do to cause that or not cause that. Like it's now it truly is just like in the hands of the universe." And the doctor's telling me all this, I know to help me like feel better. And I was just like, "No, it's 100%." I like, say what you want, but, like,
I know
I know
it.
this is it. I know this is it. And so I walked out of that clinic pregnant, knowing I was pregnant, even though I had to wait a few weeks to confirm. And it was just night and day from all of those IUIs where I didn't even know what I wanted. I knew what I wanted when I got pregnant with my
Wow.
son. And best day. I mean, such an incredible experience. I was so excited. Yeah. And now he's 4.5 and it's been a wild ride, but
Oh my
it's been
God.
amazing.
I think I've never heard such an incredible on-spot story about really listening to yourself, like working so deeply with yourself and the universe and life in such like alignment and getting to that point where it just flows, It sounded like it's so different from what we were talking before, like the Facebook groups and the all the push, push, push. And just wow, that's really incredible, Katie. And it gave me chills and everything. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And what's something that feels hotter, healthier, happier, or more you than ever before?
Um, I love being a business owner. Love it. And I never meant to be. I've been an educator for 20, this is my 20th year. And I still work part-time for the school district. So I started my business sort of accidentally because I had started the podcast and then I decided to go through coach training. This was all back in 2020. So before I was even pregnant, I went through a coach training. I needed some practice clients. So of course, I because of the podcast, I was like, I'm already scouting for women who are telling these types of stories. This will be who I coach just for practice. I really was only going through the coach training for my own knowledge. And I did the same thing with yoga teacher training, knowing I would never teach a day of yoga in my life. I just wanted the background knowledge. So that's what I thought was happening. And I loved coaching women in this space. I loved even though I wasn't a mom yet myself and I was still on the journey myself, personal development wise and that like trusting my intuition and like really tapping into what I truly desired, like that piece was starting to feel more solidified. And so I did feel enough just a few steps ahead to be able to support other women and really like
Yeah.
finding themselves in that journey. And I loved it so much. But I never thought it would be something that I did that I monetized. I never thought it would certainly didn't think it would be a career, but it just kept growing and growing. And I started doing some group work. And then I realized how important it was for me, but also for these other women to see the other just incredible women who are making this decision. Because for me, the path was so laden with shame around how did I end up here? What's wrong with me that no one chose me? Why can't I make this work? Everybody else seems to be able to make this work. And I couldn't see in myself what I could see in all these other women. And I remember just thinking time and time again, women would like pop up on my Zoom screen and I'd be like, why are you single? Like, what's, I don't
Ah,
understand. But I didn't feel that way about myself, and so I knew that that was the case for
yeah.
other women too, so I started doing group work, and that was where I was like, this is a business that has to exist in the world, and I think I'm the one to do it. So in the beginning, I was doing it pregnant, I was doing it with an infant, I was doing it, 1 or 2 nights a week, I was getting a babysitter, I was exhausted and not sleeping, but I was driven by this desire to create something that younger me just desperately needed. And it got to a point where I realized I was losing money by going to work every day because if I could just have more time to work on this business, that it actually would provide for my little family of 2 even better than the
Mm,
career I had been in for 20 years. And so I was able to go
yeah.
down to part-time. Now I'm going to full-time, and it's just been such a fun adventure because one of my favorite coaches says that entrepreneurship is personal development disguised as a financial opportunity, and that's exactly what it is. Like, you have to learn so much about yourself, and it's so fun to pull the levers and see, like, do people respond to this offer? And,
Yeah.
like, how much are people willing to pay for that? And and like what is the value received? Like what is the feedback that I get? And as a business owner, I really think in terms of value versus money. And so when I, for example, raise my prices, I get so excited because my goal, my my promise to myself and my clients is that the value you receive will always exceed the monetary amount. I want every person who ever spends a dollar with me to walk away saying, I would have happily paid double if I had known what I was going to get for that. Right. And so when I
Yeah.
raise prices, that means I'm leveling up the value. And so I'm constantly thinking, okay, how do I give more? And it doesn't necessarily mean like more bells and whistles or more hours or more, but just like, how do I continue to evolve so that I have more to offer? And
Exactly.
it's just, it's so fun
Yeah.
because it causes the tide to rise for everyone. It's like if as I grow as a business, I'm growing as a human, and what I'm able to offer to my son, to my friends, to my family, to everyone just continues to increase. And it's so funny because I was just talking with a financial advisor about retirement, and I was like, I want to be clear, like I do want money for the future. I don't ever plan to retire. Like I think I'll be good when I die. Retirement sounds terrible. Why would I ever stop
Yeah.
working? And I feel so blessed to have found something that doesn't feel like work. It just like I feel like the question was like, where do you feel like? What were all the adjectives? Hotter, healthier, better. Just
Hotter,
all
healthier,
of those.
happier, more you than ever before.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. All of that. It has leveled up every area of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. The school of business, right? And it's because you
Yeah,
cannot serve people. I so see that myself. You cannot serve people unless you up level yourself, or there's a ceiling, right? To you can serve people up until that level, and then you have to
right.
grow yourself, and it's like an ever evolving spiral. And wow, that's so incredible, Katie. We keep coming back to this point of intuition, right? And because the way to make it fun in business, and in the single parenthood path. Now it's fun, I suppose, but sometimes it wasn't. And how I feel there's this connection between like pleasure and fun. And when you're more in tune with yourself and actually going with that flow and things feel easier, it's because you are following your intuition and more in your body than in your head. How do you do that? Like, what are the ways in which you stop outsourcing your intuition and live more from it?
Yeah. So we're talking about intuition, which I'm very like visual. So I picture like intuition is down here and like our thoughts are up here. The answer that I'm going to give you is a little bit more like in the head, even though I do feel like it taps into the intuition. So rather than, I think the way that most people operate is that I'm going to take some action or circumstances are going to happen and then we'll see how I feel once it happens, right? For me, I kind of operate in the reverse, and this is how I coach my clients as well. I think decide how you want to feel and make that the non-negotiable. So if I want to feel happier, freer, lighter, and I have a decision to make, I don't believe that door A will lead to those feelings and door B won't, and I have to choose correctly or else I'm screwed and I will never feel that way. I believe it's my responsibility to create that experience regardless of what I choose. So let's just take just like, do I leave my part-time job or do I, to coach full time? But then it's like, it's a bit scary because everything relies on me and I'm a single parent and blah, blah, blah. Or do I stay with the stable thing, but also kind of have a sense that it might be holding me back? Like, there's not one or the other. It's like, if I want to feel a certain way, what would the work look like to feel that way in scenario A? And what would the work look like to feel that way in scenario B? Because you can always feel however you want to feel because
Yeah.
thoughts create feelings, right? But I'm one of those paths might feel more aligned or just easier, smoother, less friction. And so that's kind of how I make my decisions is by first choosing how I want to feel. And then backing up into like, okay, what would my responsibility be on either side to create that feeling?
Yeah, reverse engineering the feelings.
Yeah.
I love that. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love asking this question about intuition because even though it's something that I work on constantly, as a somatic coach is at the center of my work, every woman has her point of view on it and it's so enriching. So thank you so much. I love that.
Yeah.
And I will remember that reverse engineer your feelings to what you want. We'd love to talk a little about if this chapter of your life had a title, what would it be?
Hmm. Um, if it had a title, well, this chapter I think is very much about like self trust. I think that being right at this edge of truly stepping away, I've been with the same employer for 20 years and it's been part-time for the last 2 years and it doesn't contribute a whole lot to my income, but it is a bit of a safety net, right? And so I think that trusting myself, not needing a 10-year plan or even a 5-year plan, just believing that it's not about having the perfect business plan. It's about being the woman who will know when it's time to pivot, will know when it's time to recalibrate and do things differently. And that's a conversation I have a lot with my clients as well, because oftentimes they're playing when they come to me in coaching what I call kind of the cosmic game of whack-a-mole. Do you know the arcade game whack-a-mole where the it's like a little animal, like a little gopher or something, like it pops up and you hit it with a mallet and then another
Oh,
one.
right. Yeah, yeah,
I think that they come in and they're like, "What do I do about childcare? What about finances? What about this? What about that? Am I ever gonna date again?" Like, they have all these moles
yeah.
popping up and they're trying to whack them.
Eh, yeah, that's a good image.
The opposite side of that is, what if you just believed you were always gonna hit the mole because of who you are? Like, what
Yeah.
if it was about you, the person holding the mallet, and not how complex the mole was when it popped up? Because we're never gonna solve for every single circumstance, and we spend a lot of time worrying about things that actually never even happen, or like a different version of that problem ends up being the one that happens, and we spin our wheels and we waste a lot of time. We spend a lot of time in anxiety and like future tripping, and it's just not a very pleasant or effective way to think. And so I really work with women on almost like turning the view around to like not the moles that are popping up, but the person that's holding the mallet, and being like, think of all the times something unexpected popped up and you handled it. Like, where is all the evidence that you already have that you are a person who can handle this? And I tell this is something I say usually only to clients, but I will share it here because it's not like the most generous thing to think towards other people. But one of the comments that single mothers by choice often get from partnered women is, "Oh, I could never do that. Oh, my husband is so helpful, and oh my god, I could never do that." And what I tell them is like, "Yeah, she probably couldn't." Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, but that doesn't
yeah.
mean you can't. Like, that doesn't mean you can't. Good for her that she found her partner when she did, because not
Yeah,
everyone can. But, like, turn that mirror around. You can't.
yeah,
You can't.
exactly.
You wouldn't be in this position if you weren't suited for it.
Absolutely. That's yeah, she probably has her own type of school, whatever
Right.
that school is.
Yeah.
Like life gave her another school. But yeah, you have this is cool and of course you can. And I love it because it's really funny, but it's
Yeah.
also very true.
Yeah.
That's yeah, thank you so much for that, Katie. And that brings me to my next question, which is if another woman is listening and she feels really inspired, I mean, I feel really inspired by you, and she just is in the middle of not trusting herself, and maybe not necessarily in this area, but I know it can be any arena, right? It can be single parenthood, it can be just starting your own business, it can be whatever it is, just taking some sort of leap, and she's in that in between. What would you want her to know?
I think the 2 most important areas to focus would be, without judgment, just really noticing your thoughts, like really noticing the stories that are playing on a loop in your head and just getting curious about like neutralizing some of the negative thoughts that you're having. You don't have to switch them to positive, but instead of "I could never do that," can you ask yourself, "I wonder if I could do that. I wonder how I could do that." Like, how can you kind of find a less like tense story, that because I think we hold ourselves back so much with the thoughts that we have that we think are just the truth. Like, we don't realize that we're creating that. And so I think there's that piece. And then I think crucial to any personal development journey is going to be finding expanders, finding stories. And so that's what it's so beautiful what you're doing here, because you're putting that out into the world, right? And so I think it can happen through a podcast, it can happen through a book, it can happen, even a fictional character can be an expander for you. But I think when you can find it in real daily friends, people you can text, people, whether it's online or in person, just people who, when you say, I'm going to be a solo mom, they're not like, oh my God, that's going to be so hard. They're like,
Yeah.
yeah, you could totally
You
do that.
go, girl. Yeah, you do it.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
need the people who are gonna speak that into your life, but you also need the people who are actually doing the thing that seems out of reach to you to just normalize it. And a huge part of my business is connecting women to one another because I, as a coach, cannot be an expander for every woman because they're gonna look at my family situation, my financial situation, the color of my skin, my like all sorts of
Yeah.
things and say, "Well, that works for her. It's not gonna work for me." And so what I've seen that is so beautiful is let's say a woman is like, "Well, I couldn't be a solo parent because I'm a nurse practitioner who works 24-hour shifts in the hospital, and how would you do daycare? Like, that only works for someone with a partner." And I'm like, here's 3 women who are doing it. Talk with them, right? Like, they may not have your answer, but the fact that they found an answer, all of a sudden you're
It
like,
is
"Okay."
all you need sometimes. Yeah. And as women especially because I feel society, where it's void of these amplifiers. I love that you mentioned your doctor's name and how she has been such an important part of your journey because especially the medical community and I would say every single community out there, society is built for traditional monogamy and traditional marriages and a
Mhm.
family that looks a certain way, even our legal, everything looks that way. So just having those spaces for people, women doing things their own way, it's so massively important. And
It
thank you for
is.
the work you're doing, Katie, in the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
needed. And with that, I would love to raise our glasses because I just want to say cheers. Cheers to you, Katie, to the single greatest choice and to how good it got. And
Yes. Yes.
absolutely needed, fantastic, beautiful work you're doing. Thank you on behalf of single mothers and just women like myself who find you so inspiring. Thank you and cheers to you.
Cheers. Thank you. And same to
Lovely.
you as well. I am so excited about your platform and the stories that you're going to tell, and I am a new listener of your show, so thank you for your work as well.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to Tell Me How Good It Got. Stay close for the next story because, yes, it really does get good.